Hey, it's Nina. In today's video, I'm going to talk about gate 36. Or gene key 36. So if you're not familiar about this specific gate, it is located in the solar plexus that is pointing up towards the throat center, towards gate 35. And this is a really turbulent, or it can be a very turbulent gate, because basically it's all about emotional crisis and learning how to navigate the emotional crisis and that you have in your life, and actually maturing into that through your experiences over and over. And through this process, you basically come to a place of deep vulnerability, and which ultimately leads to compassion, not necessarily for others first, more so for yourself first, so that you can embody that compassion for other people. And so I'm just going to quickly share my experience with this gate. I have 36.1 in my unconscious north node. So what that means is, as I get closer to the age of 40, this is going to be like, I'm going to experience more emotional crises and kind of like embody that energy of being vulnerable and compassion through a lot of having and experiencing lots of emotional crises. And because your north node is where you're going. So with this specific gate, I would say the last year has been probably the most humbling year of my entire life. And now that I'm like reflecting back on it and listening to a lot of Richard Rudd's audios on Gene Key 36 and reading in the Gene Keys book about it, and reading and listening to a lot of Ra's audios about this specific channel and gate, and then also taking that information and then reflecting on my life, it's like, it makes so much sense. And so the way that I'm going to explain this is just like, I'll take you through the course of my experience with it and what I feel like I have learned from it so far. And I was kind of hesitant to make this video because I still feel like I'm kind of in a lot of that learning and like integration and reflection and contemplation about this gate, but I can also create another video on this later. So to start off, I have always been like this person who has had to go to other people to like talk things out, or to kind of like dump my drama on them, or like just, I don't know, I wasn't able to basically handle my emotions. And a lot of those were driven from like unconscious thought patterns and fears, a lot of fears, and just like old patterns that I'd learned from my environment and people I grew up with. And I basically didn't have like a role model for how to handle my emotions. In fact, I was always taught to stuff them down, that they were weak and they needed to be controlled. And that's like a whole nother story, which I talk about in a couple of my other videos. So I've had this like perspective of emotions and like lack of awareness on how to really handle them or what to do with them. And I would just get caught up in them like this complete tornado. And so it would just turn into like this complete emotional crisis where like something would happen and I would immediately react, and it would just be like, oh, I'm gonna pull this person into it, I'm gonna pull this person into it. And a lot of it was because I was afraid to look at my own stuff. Well, most of the time it was. I didn't know how to sit with myself, and I didn't know how to sit with my emotions. And this is something that Gate 36 deeply, deeply teaches you, and is extremely humbling in so many different ways. And so in Gene Keys, Richard Rudd talks about turbulence is the shadow aspect, where you're just being tossed around and you're being caught up in the emotions and in this crisis, and you're not necessarily learning the lessons from it. But to shift from the shadow to the gift, and the gift is humanity, and it's all about being vulnerable and being open and keeping your heart open and being able to embody that through the so-called suffering. And you're able to do this by, seeing that in every shadow, there is a gift. So I look at it from a perspective of like, there's a seed in every shadow. And if you look at the seed, you can help to cultivate it to grow into the gift. And then eventually the siddhi, and compassion is a siddhi in this particular gene key or gate. And so when Ra talks about this and how it's explained in Gene Keys, it's a little bit more masculine. It's just more of like, okay, this is emotional crisis and you're going to go through a lot. But you learn how to ride those waves, and you're able to embody it. And in doing so, you're able to be like a role model to exemplify this, to like how to handle these emotional crises in a mature and like calm way so that you can help other people as they go through theirs. And so through all of this, compassion is deeply cultivated. And so as I'm like running around my entire life, completely blind and living in like the shadow aspect of this gene key or this gate, I was just caught up in all that turbulence. And over the past year, I don't want to say like things were taken away from me, but I just felt like the universe or my soul or whatever you want to call it was like, okay, it's time. Like, it's time for her to really get smacked across the face and look at her stuff so that she can really fully get this lesson. And this is something that I really have learned a lot about with Gene Key 36. It can be very magical and mystical. It can cause really big awakenings and like deep healings in people, like in the moment or like over time when something happens. And so that's actually something that I really experienced. I experienced like a very deep awakening, where basically I went from the turbulence and I had like nowhere to go. Like I literally went to my parents' house or to my dad's house and was there for 3 months, like sitting in my shit, not like in a negative way. I was going through the Venus sequence at the time and really learned what contemplation meant and began to practice that. And it was really, really challenging because I was sitting and using my relationships as a reflection to see what my emotional reactions were and then take full ownership of that. And so it created a lot of cognitive dissonance because I was shifting and changing as I was becoming aware of these like shadow aspects of me where I was caught up in the turbulence of all of these emotional crises. And that also meant looking at a lot of things that I had done or was doing and actually continuing to do it while I was still in that contemplative state, and how I was just like repeatedly hurting people and drawing them into my own drama. And it's not fun to take ownership of, the things that you're like, wow, I was using that person because I have a really deep fear of being alone, or because I'm afraid to go within and see the gifts that lie within me because I'm afraid of my own power, or I'm afraid to look at my own doubts about myself, or I'm afraid to take ownership that, I'm actually pointing my finger at you because I am afraid of this within myself and I'm just projecting onto somebody else. And you basically take all of your projections and then you turn them back onto yourself. And literally the only way through this is through the gift, through the humanity and being vulnerable and just keeping your heart completely open. And like this leads you to compassion, because the only way that you're going to make it through like a big awakening or like being able to look at your own stuff is through deep, deep, deep compassion and forgiveness and grace for yourself. And this isn't something that just like happens just like that when you're like, oh, I did something shitty. You're like, no, you kind of have to sit in the stink for a little bit because you realize like, oh my God, this is awful. And then you realize that like, this is not something I want to continue on. And so there are going to be so many emotions and feelings of like shame and guilt that come up, and fear and anger and self-loathing. And it's just part of this process of like refining who you are and burning off everything that you are not. But you have to like look at it straight in the eye. And so it takes great courage to be able to do something like this, because you go so deep into your own suffering and it's the only way through. And I feel like, well, a lot of stuff that I've heard and read with Richard Rudd as well is that people with this gate actually suffer very, very deeply in this lifetime in order to really be alchemized to completely open the heart and be a vessel of openness and compassion for other people, because you learn how to give that to yourself because you've been able to go into the fires and be able to come out on the other end a completely new person that like has no semblance of anything in the past. And so this is something that I've basically gone through over the past year, and it just didn't make sense at all throughout the whole part of it. I mean, I tried to make sense of it, and then I was still repeating a lot of these behaviors where I was dumping onto people or talking poorly about people, and just seeing how I was hurting so many people. And when I was able to like take a step back, I shut up basically. And I was like, wow, okay, I'm still hurting people even though I'm trying to be kind and loving and keep my heart open. But it's like I had to continue to go through those experiences like all the way through, even if that meant like repeating those same behaviors, because I had to see it in action in order for me to be like, whoa, okay. And so basically once I really like saw that, I just kind of like reined it all in, and I was like, it's just me against me. And basically like I locked myself in a room or like a house and battled it out with myself for a couple of months. And it was really ugly and really scary at times, because in those like really dark moments that I was having with myself, like it was just me. Like there was no one coming to save me. Like I could reach out to somebody else and say like, oh, I'm feeling this way, but that's like a temporary fix. Like only I can give myself those things that I'm seeking in other people. If I really want to go down the self-actualization path and I really want to find that wholeness within myself, there's literally nothing external that is going to provide that wholeness or that completeness within me. And so this is where the gift turns into the siddhi, from the humanity, being human, being open, being vulnerable, and shifting into that siddhi of compassion. And it's something that you have to repeatedly do over and over again, because you have these thoughts and these old patterns that come up that's like, oh, I'm a horrible person, or you feel deep shame or regret or whatever, which is a lot of what I was feeling and going through. And then I just sat there and I cried and I hugged myself and just treated myself as if I was like a child. I just like honored that like little Nina that was inside of me. And I was like, you know what, like how would I treat a child in this moment? I wouldn't be shaming her, and I would tell her not to feel these things, and that she is loved, and she's like, there's so much grace and compassion that she deserves. And was something I had to do over and over throughout the day, through those dark nights. And just that repetition, eventually there was like this tipping point where I realized that I began to talk to myself more kindly and catch myself in those thought loops, and I was able to give myself that compassion. And so when I had this like inner transformation over time, I noticed that I began to attract people where in the past I would have like judged them really harshly or been like, oh, this is wrong, or like judging them for where they're at. But now it's like I'm attracting these people, and they can like fully open up to me because I see them in their faults and their vulnerability, and I'm like, I love and accept you because I've been able to give that to myself. And so it's been like this beautiful like flowering and opening up of like my own energy with this specific gate, to be able to offer grace and compassion to other people and remove the judgments that I previously had. And I call my other life, because I don't feel like it's a whole nother identity and person that I was. And I'm able to sit with a person and hold space for them, and to sit with them and say, wow, like any judgment I have towards them is a judgment I have towards myself. And then I can hold space for myself and have love and compassion and use that as a moment of reflection for myself. And so that's what I really love about this gate. It's like so intense, but it's also incredibly beautiful because it softens you. Like, it brings you to this point where you have nowhere to run or hide, and you have to go and be alchemized through the suffering and the turbulence and the pain, and it's going to crack your heart wide open. And that's the way that I explain, like, when I went through everything over the past year, it was like a complete shattering of my heart. And it's just incredibly humbling. And throughout the whole process, I knew that if I shut down my heart and closed it down, like, there would be no lessons learned from whatever I was going through and experiencing. And so it was also a lesson in keeping my heart open. And this is a huge part of this gene key that allows you to cultivate that compassion and that grace, is like, as many times as you want to shut down and you want to hurt other people, you don't. You learn how to sit in the throes of your emotions and give yourself kindness, and to love on yourself in deeper ways than you ever thought you could, or even knew how to, or it was even possible. And that's the beauty. That is the gift that you find, that seed that's planted in the shadow and the turbulence. It's like it flowers into this beautiful compassion that you literally embody, and you attract others to you because they see that openness of your heart. And it's just this complete purification process. So I don't know how else to explain it other than it's just a lot of suffering, but there's so much beauty. And as I was going through everything over the past year, it was like I knew what was happening, and I knew I couldn't escape it. And so I was just there. Like, I was like, I'm here in the shit pie. And it like lasted for months and months. And I was like, but I knew it would eventually end, and that the lessons would, like, the more that I just stopped talking and the more I became aware and sat with myself and loved and accepted myself, then it would get easier and easier over time. And so for anyone who has this specific gate in their human design chart or their gene key sequence, I highly recommend exploring it and then contemplating it and seeing where in your life the shadow and the gift and the siddhi might be playing out, because it is so incredibly beautiful. It brings such a softness and a tenderness to somebody who has this, because we are given emotional crises in our lives on purpose, because it's part of our charts and it's what we're here to learn and experience in this lifetime. And those people tend to have just a little bit more grace in their hearts, and those are really beautiful people to be around, because you feel like you can really surrender and relax and be yourself and open up and not feel judged. And that's not something that a lot of people can say or do. And so I'm speaking from this solely as like, I have 36.1 in my chart. It's in my unconscious north node in my human design chart. And so it makes sense that I'm going through, or I've gone through a series of really big emotional crises. And this recent one was the most biggest one that really knocked me on my butt. And it really like showed me like where I am headed energetically, and like gave me a peek into my future about how I'm going to be helping people because of my own strength and courage to walk through the fire and be able to give myself this love and this compassion and this grace so that I can extend that to other people. And then also coupled with my conscious north node of gate 22, which is the gate of openness or grace, it's like that's what I'm speaking and sharing and embodying with people, especially as a 6 line, as a 4-6. And so I'm seeing how all of this comes together, and it's incredibly beautiful to just see how, looking at this in your chart, how you're going to exemplify this, or like how you're going to like embody this and share this with the world in different ways. And so this just happens to be my path. And like I said, it's so humbling and it's like beautiful. Like whenever I listen to Richard Rudd's audio for the 36 gene key, I just cry. So like I listened to it in like the most relaxed state. I think I was like in the bathtub listening to it, and I like bawled my eyes out like a baby, because like I felt what he was saying, like the truth of what he was saying, because this is a really challenging gate. And for anyone who doesn't have this gate, you might experience it when you're around somebody who has it. So say you have an open solar plexus, and you're around somebody that has a defined solar plexus with the 36 gate, or the transits has a 36 gate, you might notice life might be a little bit more bumpy around those people or during that time period. And so you can kind of get a taste of what our lives are like and what we kind of experience day to day. Not that it's like a bad thing. Like I said, it's like over time, that refinement and having that expanded self-awareness helps you navigate these emotional so-called crises to the point where I wouldn't even really label them as crises, especially if you're sitting in contemplation and observation of what's coming up for you, and not necessarily neutralizing it, but allowing yourself to work through those emotional waves, and then knowing that there is like such a negative gold at the end that you're just going to add to like your bank of like compassion and love and what you can offer people in the world, because you've gone through those experiences and you've done it with grace. And yeah, that's gate 36. And I think that's all that I have to say about it right now. I'm gonna sit in more contemplation about this, and I will create another video if I feel called to. So thanks so much for watching. And if anyone would like to have more information about human design or gene keys, go to my website at nina-elise.com, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, or if you want to leave a comment below. And if you have gate 36 or you're going through some sort of crisis, feel free to reach out to me. I also do one-on-one, I don't want to say coaching, but it's like one-on-one, being able to work with other people as they go through their deconditioning process to provide support and tools. in order to learn how to embody that humanity and that gift and move towards that compassion for yourself, which is so beautiful. So thanks so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.